Good day. I'm CTS Nihara Basher-Talib and I will be presenting to you my report in Educ 505 Measurement and Evaluation. I will discuss Unit 14 Criterion Reference Test and Unit 15 Norm Reference Test and the difference of CRT and NRT and the extent and assessment of Criterion and Norm Reference Test. So, for a start, let us first get to know what is Criterion Reference Test. In this unit, you will be able to explain the meaning of Criterion Reference Test, discuss about the characteristics of Criterion Reference Test, describe about disadvantages of Criterion Reference Test, and to describe the applications of Criterion Reference Test. So, to give you a hint of the content of this unit, here are some keywords. First is test. So, test is an examination of somebody's knowledge or ability consisting of questions for them to answer or activities for them to carry out. Next is criterion. So, criterion is a standard or principle by which something is judged. And predetermine. So, predetermine is to decide something in advance so that it does not happen by chance. So, what is criterion reference test? So, CRT is a test that provides a basis for determining a candidate's level of knowledge and skills in relation to a well-defined domain of content. Also, it is a type of test introduced by Glaser in 1962 and Poffa-Manisak in 1969. It is also known as domain reference test, competency test, basic skills test, mastery test, performance test or assessments, authentic assessments, objective reference test, standards-based test, credentialing exams, and more. So, what all of these tests have in common is that they attempt to determine a candidate's level of performance in relation to a well-defined domain of content. Also, CRT is an assessment and test that measures students' performance. Also, this measures the performance of the students alongside fixed criteria. So, these criteria include written and brief reports of what students are capable of doing at different stages. In other words, the Criterion Reference Test is a set of fixed criteria, again, that used to measure students' performance. Also, these assess the students' performance. So, what is the meaning of Criterion Reference Test? The main objective of this is to check whether students have learned the topic or not. By definition, CRT is a test in which questions are written according to specific predetermined criteria. So, a student knows already what their standards are for passing and only competes against him or herself while completing. A CRT is designed to measure how well test takers have mastered a particular body of knowledge. These generally have multiple choice, true, false, and open-ended questions. They play an important role to take a decision about students' performance. And also, these tests generally have an established passing score. So the students know what the passing score is, and an individual's test score is determined by knowledge of the course material. So in Department of Education, our passing score is 75%. So, and classroom sitting, mastery level, if nakakuha yung bata sa mga bata mo sa evaluation ng 80% mastery. So, meaning, kapag nakakuha ka na ng 80% mastery, dun sa lesson mo, pwede ka na mag-proceed. So, the same then, sabi, 75 ang passing score sa DepEd. Characteristics of the Criterion Reference Test. Number 1, authority. So, it actually assesses whether they measure what it claims or not. An individual item matches with its goal. Also, if the situations and performance specified in the aim signify in the item or not. Number 2, consistency. It means that if it always measures what it states. Also, consistency means if they have a high degree of confidence in the scores or not. Any random error in the tool can make it unreliable. Number 3, practicality. So not all assessment is reliable because of cost and time. It is not always possible to design reliable and accurate tests. Also, the decision should considerably relate to important factors. Number 4, subject mastery. This helps with the pathway, the performance of students within the course of study. Also, these test items can be made to match precise purposes. Criterion reference test also judges how well the student knows and understands the topic. And number 5, managed locally. Generally, these develop at the classroom level. Also, the teacher can easily check if the standards are met or not. Besides, they also identify shortages. Results of tests are quickly obtained to give students helpful feedback on performance. So, what are the disadvantages of CRT? CRT have some built-in disadvantages. So, what are these? First, creating tests that are both valid and reliable requires fairly extensive and expensive time and effort. Second, in addition, results cannot be generalized beyond the specific course or program. Such tests may also be compromised by students gaining access to test questions prior to exams. And CRT are specific to a program and cannot be used to measure the performance of large groups. So, analyzing test items. Item analysis is used to measure the effectiveness of individual test items. So, si item analysis, di ko na siya i-discuss masyado kasi sa ibang reporters, merong nakatoka dyan kay item analysis. So, the main purpose is to improve tests, to identify questions that are too easy, too difficult, and too susceptible to guessing. While test items can be analyzed on both criterion reference and norm reference tests, the analysis is somewhat different because the purpose of the two types of test is different. The criterion reference tests are used in many ways. So, classroom teachers use them to monitor student performance in their day-to-day activities. The states find them useful for evaluating student performance and generating educational accountability information at the classroom, school, district, and state levels. The tests are based on the curricula and the result provide a basis for determining how much is being learned by students and how well the educational system is producing desired results. Criterion reference tests are also used in training programs to assess learning. Typically, pretest post-test designs with parallel forms of criterion reference tests are used. And finally, CRT are used in the credentialing field to determine persons qualified to receive a license or certificate. So, yung mga bar exam, Sharia exam, any licensure exam, ano siya, criterion reference test ang mga yun. So, now, we will proceed to Unit 15, the norm reference test. So, in this unit, you will be able to explain the meaning of norm reference test, describe about the characteristics of norm reference test, and to discuss about the accuracy of test scores. Also, you will be able to describe about the advantages and disadvantages of norm reference test. So, some of the keywords are norm. That means it's a situation or a pattern of behavior that is usual or expected. Achievement, which means the act of process of achieving something. And reference, the act of asking somebody for help or advice. So what is norm reference test? So NRT is a type of test, assessment, or evaluation which yields an estimate of the position of the tested individual in a predefined population with respect to the trait being measured. Also, it is a uniform test. It ranks and compares students in relation to one another. Also, they measure performance on the basis of the theoretical average. Besides, it compares the result of a statistically selected group. So, yung mga National Achievement Test, NRT yan sila. Yung IQ test, NRT din yan. Yung college entrance test, no? Yung SASE. SASE is considered a norm reference test. This estimate is derived from the analysis of test scores and possibly another relevant data from a sample drawn from the population. This type of test identifies whether the test taker performed better or worse than other test takers, but not whether the test taker knows either more or less material than is necessary for a given purpose. So, what is the meaning of norm reference test? So, this type of test determines students' placement on a normal distribution curve. The students compete against each other on this type of assessment. This is what is being referred to with the phrase grading on a curve. So it also allows us to compare a student's skills to others in his age group. It is developed by creating the test items and then administering the test to a group of students that will be used as the basis of comparison. After the norming process, the tests are used to assess groups of students or individuals using standardized or highly structured administration procedures. These students' performance is rated using skills developed during the norming process. They answer questions such as, does the student's achievement score appear consistent with his cognitive score? The degree of difference between those two scores might suggest or rule out a learning disability. Usually ito sa mga IQ test. And statistical methods are used to determine how raw scores will be interpreted and which performance levels are assigned to each score. Many tests yield standard scores, which allow comparison of the student's scores to other tests. So what are the characteristics of the norm reference test? First is defining. So they measure the performance of a student in comparison to all students, but it does not define the meaning of all. Thus, they measure the success of an educational restructuring against fixed aims. Second is preset results. It means that the norms were traditionally set, and the score level is set at 50%, but this goal is really high to achieve if we talk about all the students. Number three, quality of grades. So not all assessment is reliable because of cost and time. So it is not always possible to design reliable and accurate tests. Also, the decision should considerably relate to important factors. And number four, changing difficulty level. The difficulty level of scores changes from year to year. Also, the passing rates of students vary from class to class. Likewise, fourth grade has different difficulty level and 10th grade has a different difficulty level as well. Number five, fear of failure. So in norm reference tests, the students have fear of failure. Besides, it compares their performance with other students. Number six, be competitive. So NRT gives students a chance to improve their performance. Also, students can know how much they have to prepare to compete with others. And lastly, being self-confident. So it means that students should take their performance confidently. Also, they should work hard to improve their performance. So, yung mga Olympics, mga division meet, palarong pambansa, intramurals, norm reference test siya actually. Accuracy of test scores. So, number one, the items on the test are only a sample of the whole subject area. So, these are often thousands of questions that could be asked. But, tests may have just a few dozen questions. A test score is therefore an estimate of how well the student would do if she could be asked all the possible questions. Second, all tests have measurement error, so there are no tests that is perfectly reliable. A score that appears as an absolute number, say Jamal 63, really is an estimate. For example, Jamal's true score is probably between 56 and 70, but it could be even further off. Sometimes results are reported in score bands which show the range within which a test taker's true score probably lies. Number three, there are many other possible causes of measurement error. For example, a student can be having a bad day. So, test taking conditions often are not the same from place to place. They are not adequately standardized. So, different versions of the same test are in fact not quite exactly the same. So, number four, subscores on tests are even less precise. This is mostly because there are often very few items on the subtest. So, let's say a score band for a Juanita's math subtest might show that her score is between 33rd and 99th percentile because only a handful of questions were asked. Number five, scores for young children are much less reliable than for older students. This is because young children's moods are and attention are more variable. Also, young children develop quickly and unevenly, so even the accurate score today could be wrong next month. Verse 6. What do score I what do score increases mean? If your child's or your school score goes up on a norm reference test, does that mean she knows more or the school is better? Maybe yes and maybe not. The school's gonna teach everything. They teach some facts, some procedures, some concepts, some skills, but not others. So often, schools focus most on what is tested and stop teaching many things that are not tested. So when scores go up, it does not mean the students know more. It only means they know more of what is on the test. And last one is teaching to the test explains why scores usually go down when a new test is used. No, so a district or state or national usually uses an NRT for 5 to 10 years. So each year, the score goes up as teachers become familiar with what is on the test. So when a new test is used, the scores suddenly drop. The students don't know less. It is just that different things are now being tested. So, what are the advantages of norm reference test? It compares students. It is often easiest to use a NRT because they were created to rank test takers. If there are limited spaces, such as in a gifted and talented program, and choices have to be made, it is tempting to use a test constructed to rank students, even if the ranking is not very meaningful and gives out some qualified children. NRTs are a quick snapshot of some of the things most people expect students to learn. So they are NRT are relatively cheap and easy to administer. If they were only used as one additional piece of information and not much importance was put on them, they would not be much of a problem. Then, what is the disadvantages of norm reference test? First is the damage caused by using NRTs is far greater than any possible benefits the tests provide. So, the main purpose of NRTs is to rank and sort students, not to determine whether students have learned the material they have been taught. They do not measure anywhere near enough of what students should learn. They have very harmful effects on curriculum and instruction. Second is any one test can only measure a limited part of a subject area or a limited range of important human abilities. So, a reading test may measure only some particular reading skills, not a full range of the ability to understand and use text. Same goes with the multiple choice math test that can measure skill in computation or solving routine problems, but they are not good for assessing whether students can reason mathematically and apply their knowledge to new real world problems. Third is norm reference tests also can lower academic expectations. So, NRT support the idea that learning or intelligence fits a bell curve. If educators believe it, they are more likely to have low expectations of students who score below average. Tests often cause teachers to overemphasize memorization and de-emphasize thinking and application of knowledge. Since the tests are very limited, teaching to them narrows instruction and weakens curriculum. So, making test score gains the definition of improvement often guarantees that schooling becomes test coaching. As a result, students are deprived of the quality education they deserve. Lastly, most NRTs focus too heavily on memorization and routine procedures. So, tests like these cannot show whether a student can write a research paper, use history to help understand current events, understand the impact of science on society, or debate important issues. They don't test problem solving, decision making, judgment, or even social skills. Usually sa mga NRT, multiple choice lang siya. Katulad na lang nung sa LET, Licensure Exam for Teachers. Kung titingnan mo, halos-halos, lang siya, multiple choice. So, we are done in Unit 14 and 15. So, the question is, what is the difference between the two? So, in terms of performance, in the CRT, each student is independently assessed, while in norm reference test, they are judged on the basis of other students' performance. In terms of comparison, the CRT does not compare a student's performance with other students, while the NRT compares the student's performance with other students. For the objective, CRT's main objective is to help students learn without getting questioned about grades. While in NRT, its main objective is to assess a student's performance with other students. In criteria, CRT have fixed criteria for assessment. Meron siyang rubric. Si NRT naman, their criteria changes with outcomes. In terms of results, CRT's results can be derived quickly kasi lang siya, school parang one session lang siya. While NRT takes little time to derive results kasi marami yung nagtitake, matagal yung pagkuha ng results. Like sa licensure exam, kukuha ka ng magtitake ka September, lalabas yung result December. In terms of examples, CRT clinical skill competency tools. Then sa NRT naman is class examination. So what are the extent and assessment of criterion and norm reference test? In purpose, NRT ranks students with respect to their achievements and tell apart between high and low grade achievers. While in CRT, they decide whether students have achieved the skills or not, and also find about how much students know before and after instructions has been given. So in the content, NRT deals with broad skills areas with samples from a variety of textbooks, while CRT deals with a specific skill which make a choosing course of study. And the characteristics of items, NRT skills test on less than 4 items, and their difficulty level varies from others, and items tell apart high and low grades. So in CRT, the skills test on at least 4 items to obtain an adequate sample, and these are all parallel in difficulty. While the explanation of scores of the two, NRT compare each individual test giver with other test givers and expresses scores and percentage or an equal grade. The achievement report of students is for broad areas, but some report for individual skills. While in CRT, it judges each individual performance on the basis of set standards, and achievement report of students is for individual skills. So, to understand more about the norm reference test and criterion reference test, let me show you a short video.
Hello and welcome to Teachings in Education. Now let's compare normed reference assessments versus criterion referenced assessments. How are they similar and how are they different? So what is the aim or purpose to norm referenced assessments? Well, they have a goal to rank students based on test achievement scores. On the other hand, what is the goal of criterion reference assessments? Their goal is to measure the skills and knowledge that a student has mastered. In norm reference assessments, scores are given as a rank, and they are based on other student scores, similar to a race where competitors are ranked for gold, silver, and bronze. With criterion reference assessments, student scores are usually given as a percentage. If a student gets all questions right, for example, that is 100%. Now, a norm reference test would differ from a criterion reference test in the number of students tested. Norm reference tests usually assess a large number of students. Criterion, on the other hand, usually assess a smaller number of students. Norm tests take a longer time to develop, and these tests take a longer period of time for the students to complete as well. Criterion reference tests are not as long as your norm reference tests. These tests usually last only about a class period. Normed assessments are developed on a larger scale compared to criterion. They're often developed on a state or national level, and criterion reference tests can be developed individually. They are mostly created by the classroom teacher. So right now, I just want to say thank you for your time. Please like, please share, and most importantly, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much.
Okay, so siguro medyo naintindihan na, no? So, for a conclusion, after going through the characteristics and difference between norm and criterion reference test, we can conclude the following things. First of all, both are suitable for different tasks. Secondly, both have their own criteria of judgment. And lastly, they follow different norms and values. So thank you very much for listening. God bless.